Hi children, welcome to Eclipse Learning. So this is the second part of second chapter of grade 10. So if you haven't watched my previous videos, please go and watch them first using the playlist grade 10 textbook. So this is the second part of the second chapter, right? So let's start. So in this chapter, we will be talking about mainly about the computer system, what are the devices we have and all. So we'll start with function of a computer system, right? So this image is very important because this shows the main functions of a computer system, right? How data comes as from the input devices and how processing and how storing and how the output happens in the computer. So there are several components we used in this one. So if you see this picture, right, we have first input devices, right? So all the data and instructions are fed to the computer using the input devices. Then it will go to the main memory or the primary memory. We will be talking about what is primary memory and all later. But just for now, remember this is going to the primary memory. So you can see this red dotted line is showing the data and instructions flow, right? So this will be coming to the main memory and this will be sent to the CPU or the central processing unit for the processing. So this is the central processing unit, right? Here it have three main things. You may already know this. So this is the control unit, right? This is the arithmetic and logical unit, and this is the registers. So we will be talking about each component later, but remember in the CPU we have all these three things. So the main memory is sending this to the CPU and CPU will do the processing and the processed data will be coming back to the primary memory. So this is what which will be sent to the output devices to give it to the final user. So this data and information can be stored in the secondary memory as well. We will be talking what is main memory and what's the secondary memory, what's the difference. So this is for the permanent storage, right? So this will be saved here, okay, in the secondary memory, right? So if you think about this black line, black arrows, it is the command or the control signals, right? So you can see all the command signals are starting from the control unit. So we know control unit is basically to control all the other elements in the computer. So it is sending control signals to all the devices which is attached to the computer system. Understood? So this computer memory is having its data and instructions stored, and these things should be actually sent to the CPU. So then only the control unit can do the signal generation, right? So this one is actually how computer works, right? It's how these internal components are working together. Okay, then we are going to talk about basic physical components. So here we are going to learn about input devices, output devices, storage devices, and all these things. And for some kids, this may be very easy one. You already know these things, but I will do from the scratch, right? So these are the input devices. So earlier we learned input devices are used to give the data and instructions to the computer, right? We using these devices, we are feeding data and instructions to the computer system, right? So there are so many uh, input devices, but when it comes to the keyboard, that's the most common input device, right? Most of the computers will have this. So keyboard is actually came into play with the idea of the typewriter. Actually, the nowadays typewriter is like obsolete. We don't use it anymore with the computer came into picture. So, but initial idea was taken from the typewriter, right? But in keyboard, we have more functionalities which will be suiting for the computers as well. So here they are telling keyboards are usually coming in two sizes, but it's not only two sizes. There are so many varieties. For example, now if you think about the full keyboard, it will have roughly 104 to 108 keys. So that means you have almost this all the keys, letters, function keys, control keys, numeric pads, and all these things. But there are different types of keyboards. For example, you will miss in some keyboards, you will miss the numeric pad. All right. In some keyboards, you will miss these function keys. So when you are selecting the keyboard, you have to think about your objective, right? Some need to have a lesser space, so they like to have some kind of compact keyboards. Some likes to have the all functionality. It depends on your requirement. So there are different types of keyboards, but here in your textbook they are telling it's about 101 to 102 keys computer type, and the 104 to 108 range of keys. Those are the two sizes usually we have, but there are so many varieties. Okay, so if you think about the keyboard, these things we learn in the smaller grades also. So if you have missed your IT education in like from grade 6, please watch those videos again, so you can have kind of like overall foundation with you, because grade 10 and 11 it's like for the O levels, right? So this at this level, it's better if you have some kind of a foundation in smaller grades. So I have done all the videos for grade from grade 6 onwards, so you can watch them, so you can be very confident at this stage then, because you know the foundation, right? So here we have the keyboard. Now you may know these things. We have the letter keys, right? Typing keys. And we have the special keys like this enter key, caps lock, shift key like this. And we have function keys, right? Where is F1, F2, F3 like that. You have function keys. So you have to press these keys with the function key. And we have control keys, right? Like this end, home, and all these things, right? Alt. And we have the numeric keys. So numeric keys you have here as well. In this one also you have, right? And we have other special symbol keys, arrow keys, right? So that's how a keyboard layout works. Then we are going to talk about the pointing devices, right? So under pointing devices, we are talking about different pointing devices, and the most popular thing is most popular pointing device is the mouse, right? So mouse, we have buttons, and we have a left button and a right button, and usually we have a wheel in between to roll up and roll down, right? So in a laptop, you can use a mouse as externally connected, or you can use this touchpad, right? So that's how in the laptop the mouse is working. So this is a touch screen. This is very common now, what you have in your mobile devices. So here with the touching the screen, you can give the input to the screen. Then comes the joystick, right? This is also a pointing device. So now we are learning the pointing devices. Okay. So we learn about mouse, and then we learn about the touch screen, and then comes the joystick. So this is basically used for the gaming purposes. Most of the kids may have used this when you're playing games, right? And then comes the light pen, right? This light pen, sometimes you can see this in your tab also. You will get like a pen kind of a thing where you can draw on your screen. You can write also. Now with your handwriting, you can write it. So this is mostly using in the computer-aided designs, but not only that, even for teaching purposes, we can use this. For example, if you are doing some mathematical operations to do some writing stuff, you can use the light pen. So it's more easy to uh, convey your message, right? So those are the pointing devices. We learn about keyboard, then the pointing devices, and then we learn about the imaging and video input devices, right? So digital camera, most of the people will have. So this is to take the photographs and videos, and you give this as an input to the computer, right? And then comes the webcam. So in a laptop, this webcam is already positioned, already it's there on the top of your laptop monitor here, right? or if it is a desktop machine, you should be able to externally connect using a USB port or something like that. So this is basically used for for capturing like for in your video conference calls and all to capture your video, right? And then comes the CCTV. You have seen this CCTV cameras in your surroundings, in the shops and all. So these are also easy to capture images and videos, right? Especially for the security purposes and for the road safety, we have been using these CCTV cameras. So those are the now we learned about keyboard pointing devices and image and video capturing devices. Now comes the scanners, right? So scanners, there are so many types of scanners. This flatbed scanner is one of the scanners. Usually what happens in a scanner is it's kind of like a photocopy machine. But here, when you give the image, like document or some image, it will be captured with maybe using the laser beams like technology, and then you convert it into a digital data. Now think you have a document, you have your birth certificate, you want to take a digital copy of it. Now in a photocopy machine, what happens is you get a physical copy, right? But here it's a digital copy you can get, and this scanned document or the image, you can save it in the computer, then like a soft copy. Then you can take another printout. Okay, that's how it works. Then comes the barcode readers, right? You may have seen in your price tags and all these things, we are having a barcode. So to read this barcode, especially in the shops, we have this barcode reader. So this barcode in the tag can be converted into alphanumeric value and can be fed it to the computer, right? For example, this stock management and all these things, pricing and all this information can be managed using this barcode. Then comes the magnetic ink character reader, MICR. So especially this is used in banks, right? You may have seen in a check. If I don't think you have done some transactions with checks, but your parents may have. So if you take a check to the bank, they will scan this using MICR, and then they will actually read the numbers on the check, like the bank code, bank account number, all this information, and we'll be using those information in the computer. Then comes the OCR, right? Optical character recognition. This is used to identify the character, right? So you can easily capture text in a book or a document, and this can be like a kind of a digitalize, right? So this is basically used in libraries and government institutes. Like you can capture some document into the character level for digitally. Then comes the optical mark recognition. Sometimes you may have seen this when you're doing MCQs in some exams, if they are like correcting using computers. They may ask you to color the correct answer with a pencil, right? Then it will be used to recognize these marks using a pens, like which was done using a pencil or a pen. And then you can correct these exam papers using a optical mark recognition, right? OMR. So most of these exams, especially foreign exams and all, if you have MCQs, they are marking these MCQ papers using this optical mark recognition, because it's just to check whether this 10th question has the answer to, right? So it is very easily can be done using a OMR device. So even in the ATM machine, right, there's a scanner, right? So if you know what is ATM, right? Automated teller machine. The banks, you have the ATM machine where you can directly go and give your card, right? And maybe debit or a credit card can be inserted, and they will automatically scan the card and will get the information, right? Then when you give the PIN numbers and all, you can easily do the transactions. You don't have to wait in the queues, right? So in the ATM machine also we have the scanners. Then comes the microphone, right? Mic, right? So to give the feeding the sound to the computer. So basically, we learn about the input devices under categories, right? We learn keyboard and microphone separately. Other than that, we have three categories like pointing devices, scanners, and image and video capturing devices. So there were five main categories. Under that, we have learned other devices as well. So that is the input devices. So this is the output devices, right? So output devices means now you have given the input data to the computer and they will process, and this processed information then you have to give it back to the user. So you have to produce the processed information to the, you have to give it to the user. So for that we are using output devices. So this output can be given as a soft copy or a hard copy or as the sound, right? So soft copy means like which is the output on the screen, which is intangible, which you cannot touch, right? So the monitor is giving actually a intangible output, right? Because you cannot touch that. It's a soft copy. So monitor is one of the very common output device we have, right? So people call it a screen, visual display unit. There are different types, and monitors there can be various types, right? But today mostly common thing is the LCD and LED screens. But earlier days we had this cathode ray tube CRT monitors. Remember in the earlier days we had this big, even the TV we had this, right? Not only for computers, we have very big unit, right? Very large, and it's very hard to take here and there, and it consumes very lot of electricity. Now, sometimes people keep these old monitors and TVs at their home uh, without going for new technologies. But if you carefully think, it actually consumes a lot of electricity. So if you change these equipments, you can easily reduce your electricity bill. It's very similar to these fridges also. Very old fridges will be consuming a lot of electricity. So it's not efficient. So it's better to change it. Okay. So then we have LCD, liquid crystal display. So this is the flat kind of screen. So in your houses, mostly you will have this LCD and LED screens, and these are good for the eye also when you're using it. So these are very portable versions and consume very less electricity, right? So these two have two different technologies. In LCD, we have these polarized materials with liquid crystal solution. It's having different technology, but in LED, it's you having the usual LEDs, right, to for the display. So we can see these things in billboards, even in the naming boards and all these places as well. And this is very common and very popular today because of the easiness and less size and easy to port. Very high portability is there, and it is consuming lesser electricity as well. So then comes the multimedia projector. All these are giving soft copies, soft copy outputs, right? So multimedia projectors in your schools, you may have seen these things, right? This is basically used to give the output to a wide screen, like to give the output for a large audience. We use multimedia projectors, right? So these things can be used when teaching, right? When doing a presentation, when conducting a business meeting, right? Even for entertainment purpose also, sometimes you can have a projector and you can have a larger screen and you can um, watch a movie, right, in a classroom, like for the larger audience. So this is the hard copy. Now we learn output can be given in three ways: soft copy, hard copy, and the sound. So hard copies means tangible outputs, right? Like the printout. Like when you get a printout, you have the output in a way where you can touch, right? So printers are giving hard copies, right? So there are two types of printers: impact printers and non-impact printers. And under that, they have given some examples, right? So what is the difference, right? Impact printers, right? So actually the primary difference is the printing technology, right? So in the impact printers, we have a head or a needle, right? Which is actually striking against a ink ribbon, or maybe doing having some mark on the paper, right? They have a head or a needle. In non-impact printers like laser printer, we don't have a head or a needle. They use a different kind of a technology. So impact printers, remember, we have some kind of a head or a needle which is always striking on a ink ribbon or maybe on the paper, right? And it is very noisy, right? So huge noise is generated, and it's less expensive. It's cheaper, right? So it's cheaper, but quality wise, it's not very good output is given. So you can think of impact printers less quality, but cheap, but very high noise, and not very like preferred way of printing, right? But it's cheap. So most of these banks and shops to print these receipts and all, people use this technology because it's cheap. But the output can be like erased after sometimes, right? And the water resistance is not there. So quality wise, it's not good, but it's cheap. So people use for printing receipts and all these things using impact printers. So when it comes to impact printers also, there are different types like dot matrix print, right? So here using like kind of dots, the letters are printed on the paper as dots, right? So the printer's head is strike on the ink ribbon like with the needle with dots, right? So if you carefully see um, the letter, you can see it is a combination of few dots. Okay. Then comes the line printer. So here it's more faster than the dot matrix print, and it is actually printing a row at a time. So in a minute, they are telling 3,000 lines, but this performance can be vary, right? Then comes the non-impact printer. So we learn about impact printers. We learn two things there, and under non-impact printers, here there is no any striking head or a needle like that. Okay, so it is not noisy, therefore no head movements and all. So it is not noisy, and it's very quick, and it's very fast printing, but running cost is expensive. Like if you compare the price per one print paper for impact and non-impact printers, the prices differ, right? Usually in the market, when you go for a printout, they will ask, do you want a laser printout or a normal printout? So that's the difference. So normal means these impact printers, from that you will can get a cheaper printout, but make sure you are not taking those printouts for very important things, because these quality is not good. If you put some water on those printouts, it can blur, and after some time also this print will go away. So make sure you are knowing what you're really doing, and when you're taking the printout, if you need a very quality output, please go for the non-impact printers. So initial example is the laser printer. We use a laser beam. Plus in this one we have now two concepts are there, right? So here we are using we use the toner in the cartridge. So toner means dried ink. It's like a powder, right? So here there are two types. It's having a dye kind of a liquid ink, as well as we have dried ink. So in the laser printers, remember we use toner. That means dried ink. That means like a powder. So here you can go for black and white as color printouts and anything. And we have a very clear and quality printouts, but it's expensive. Some people charge like 80 rupees per paper sometimes in shops, right? Then comes the bubble or ink jet printer. So here I told you, now here in the cartridge we have the liquid ink. Right? So that's the difference. So here the ink is used like kind of a small nozzles, and then you produce the printout. Then comes the thermal printers. Thermal word itself is telling it's using heat to print the documents, right? So usually this is commonly used in ATMs and printing tags and labels and all these things. For that we use the thermal printers. So these things you can read a lot like outside. I don't want to make this very bulky with a lot of knowledge, because these things are like they won't ask very in-depth questions, in-depth questions. They will ask, they don't, we won't ask what is the technologies and all these things in very detail, but you have a basic understanding of these chapters. Uh, that's why I don't want to make this so bulky with lot of additional information in the internet. You are very easily can find lot of information about this. So if you want to uh, create a booklet or something like that, you can definitely refer the internet and do, right? So that is good for your knowledge, but I'm focusing the exam. So that's why I'm like going through the book and don't want to mess with lot of information. So then comes the plotter, right? Plotter is also now we are learning these things under what non-impact printers, right? So under that plotter is coming. So this is basically used for architectural designs, planning, and designing stuff. So actually, the plan you can draw on a paper. See, using the plotter. Then comes the sound output. Now we learn soft copies can be given, soft outputs can be given, hard outputs can be given, sound can be given as the output device. And for that, we are using speakers or headphones. Okay. Then comes the CPU, right? Now we learn about input devices, we learn about output devices, and now comes to the CPU. So this is a main component of the computer. It's considered actually as the brain of the computer as well, right? So in the CPU, we learn there are three things, right? Arithmetic and logical unit, control unit, and memory registers. So arithmetic and logical unit means ALU. This is performing all the mathematical and logical functions of the computer, right? So what is this arithmetic and logic means? Like, for example, mathematical operations, adding, subtractions, division, those things, as well as logical operation means like and operations or operation, not operation, we will be learning. But in the earlier classes, you may have learned. So these are manipulated by the ALU. And then comes the control unit, right? Earlier diagram, we learned that all the control signals are sent from control unit to all other devices. Then comes the memory register. So temporarily they are storing data, right? And information. So this is a temporary storage, right? Especially we use the data needed for arithmetic and logical unit, and input and output of ALU is kept here. So these are very expensive kind of memory type, and we have very less space there to store only the relevant information. Okay, then comes the computer speed, right? So the normally computer speed is measured using uh, the hertz. You may have heard, right? Hertz. So can be megahertz, gigahertz, like our grams, kilograms, like that. Similar to that, we have hertz, megahertz, gigahertz, like that, with different units. But the basic unit we measure the clock speed of a computer is hertz. Okay, now comes the computer memory. Now we learn about input devices, output devices, and CPU. Now comes to the computer memory. So memory is actually the storage devices, right? Where we use to store data and instructions, right? So there are actually different types of different types of computer memory. Main memory and the secondary memory. That means primary memory. We have different names for this, right? Main memory, primary memory, and all. So this is uh, one category, and we have the secondary memory, right? We will talk what's the difference between these two. And main memory, you can divide again to RAM and ROM, right? Random access memory and ROM again, right? Okay. So some people call this RAM as the main memory as well. They don't consider ROM much into this one. Some people directly tell RAM is the main memory. So, but remember, ROM also you can categorize into this main memory. So what's the difference between the primary memory and the secondary memory? So primary memory means, or the main memory means, where the memory uh, CPU can directly access, right? Understood? So secondary memory cannot be accessed directly by the CPU. So CPU can directly access the primary memory without any problems, but CPU cannot directly access secondary memory. All the secondary memory information should be loaded to primary memory, then only CPU can access it. Understood the difference? Okay. So primary memory is some now if you don't consider about ROM, if you consider only about RAM, primary memory is basically for temporary usage and it's volatile. That means if you switch off the computer, all the information on the primary memory or especially the RAM will be erased. Understood? So when it comes to RAM, this is temporary storage. And now, for example, if you open a Word document and start working on it, those information is saved in RAM. That's why we are asking you to save the document. Otherwise, if the computer goes on with without the power, then all this information will go on, right? RAM is a temporary memory, right? So when the computer is switched off, if there is no power, all this information stored in the RAM will be deleted. That's why we call it as a volatile memory, right? So all the input devices, the information sending will be actually held in the RAM, and then only it's sent to the final output devices, right? So RAM is actually having both read and write facility because we write to the RAM and we read from it. So if you think about primary memory, RAM is playing a huge role. So that's why sometimes in some books you can see primary memory is volatile. Primary memory is temporary storage. Primary memory is expensive memory. That is mainly because they are only targeting about the RAM as the primary memory. But remember ROM, if ROM comes to the play, ROM is not volatile memory, right? Usually we use ROM to keep this BIOS commands. That means like when you switch on the computer, can you see some commands are running, right? So those are called BIOS, basic input output system, like for the booting up. Okay. So all this information or the commands required for booting up a computer is stored in the ROM. So this is not a volatile memory. It is all the data is not erased when you switch off the computer. It's a non-volatile memory, right? But remember the capacity is very small and it is directly connected to the motherboard. Okay, so this is actually a computer manufacturing company itself store all these information or the commands in the ROM and then they send the computer. That's how the booting up happens. Okay, so remember the difference between RAM and ROM, but some people consider primary memory is RAM. So that's why they are telling primary memory is volatile, it is very temporary storage and all these things considering RAM. But you should know the main difference. Primary memory is the memory where the CPU can directly access. And under that we have RAM and ROM. They are two different types. RAM is volatile and ROM is non-volatile. Okay, these are a bit expensive than the secondary um, storage because these are much faster. So there's something called cache memory, right? So cache memory, you will learn this caching concept later in your stages of your education also. But basically, what happens is this is very small in capacity and very fast, right? Some people call this as CPU memory as well because this is actually acting as a mediator or a middle person between the CPU and the primary memory. Now, I told you uh, all CPU can only talk with primary memory directly. So for that, in between, we have something called cache memory where the frequent using data can be stored here. Understood? Now we'll see how this actually works. Now initially, the CPU will check the cache memories to see whether the required data is there or not. So remember, CPU is first accessing the cache memory. And if the data is existing in the cache memory, no issues, you can directly take it back to the CPU. But if the cache memory is not having that, then only CPU goes and check the primary memory for the data. Definitely it should be there. So then it is fetching data to the cache memory from the primary memory and then it is sending back to the CPU. So CPU actually accessing the cache memory first to see, because all the frequent data should be loaded to the cache memory for the fasting performance, right? So if cache memory is not having that information only, then accessing primary memory, basically RAM, not the ROM. ROM is used only at the booting up process. All the other cases we are using RAM. So cache memory, then only try to fetch it from the RAM. Okay, then comes the secondary memory or the secondary storage, right? These are used to keep data and information permanently. So these are not volatile. These are non-volatile memory. That means if you switch off the computer, it's not erasing all these data. We call this as external storage as well. So there can be actually internal storage like usual our hard disk, but external portable devices as well, right? So remember, this is non-volatile and won't be electricity dependent. So these are permanent storage devices, right? So actually, hard disk, internal hard disk also belongs to this, but in here we have again divided into three categories based on the technology they are using: secondary storage, magnetic media, optical media, and solid state. Right? We'll go and learn these things in detail. Magnetic media devices. So here they are using some kind of a magnetic field to store the data. Right? There are few examples they have given. The hard disk drive. So this is the common and very popular way of storing data in your computer, right? But remember, externally also you can connect external hard disks, right? So they have huge capacities, especially in these external hard disks, like up to 4 TBs, right? So from starting from 250 GB to 4 TB, there are huge capacities available with the technology development, right? So you can read, write data, no issues, right? It's a read, write memory. So with the development of technology, these capacities are increasing day by day. Okay. So in the hard disk, they have few components, right? We have the platter, number one. It's like this kind of CD thing like this. So this is the disk. It can be metallic, aluminium, or ceramic disk, where both side can be used to store the data. Actually, here using magnetic media. That's why these are coming under first category. Okay, so there can be several platters in the hard disk, so the capacity will increase definitely. And then number two is the spindle, right? In this rotating one. So this is actually holding the platter and rotating it. Then comes the head. Okay, so this is the head we use to read magnetic data in the platter, and writing and reading happens using this, right? So there can be two heads for the platter, one on top, one on bottom. Actuate arm. So this is moving the head, right? Enable reading and writing data on the platter. That's okay. So that is the number 4. And then number 5, where this power connecting happens, which gives the power to the hard disk, right? Then comes number 6, IDE connector, right? It is the one which transmit all the data required. Finally, you have the actuator, that's the electronic device which moves the arm connected to it, right? So it's the one moving the arm, okay? So this is connect to a motor. So that is what it helps to move the arm. Then only the head will be moved. Understood? So this is a next device under the same category, magnetic tape. Nowadays we are not actually using this. Early days we have these cassette pieces and all these magnetic tape devices. But nowadays we don't use because it has very low capacity and very slow. Okay. So optical media. So So about the magnetic media devices, we learn hard disk, magnetic tape, and floppy disk also nowadays we are not using because it has very less capacity. And even the CPUs nowadays don't have the place to insert the floppy disk. When we were learning, we had this floppy disk. That is the most important thing we had for as the storage devices. But nowadays we don't use it. So these are the main three examples under the magnetic media devices, right? In your book, it's some kind of a mixed up. And then comes the second category, optical media devices. CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays are coming under this. So here, this is not the actual example 3. This is the optical media. This is second category. So here, the data is stored digitally on the disk, right? Using a laser beam, you can read and write. But it differ. If you go through this one, you have different types of things. Now, basically, we have CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray, right? So some has only, see, CD-ROM, read only memory. So you can only use to read, uh, but one time kind of a writing, like, so only read written data and instructions. So CDR means compact disk written once. So you can write data once until the capacity is done. That's it. After that, only reading. Here, RW, that means rewritable. That means you can read and write anytime. Can be done multiple times. So same thing happens for the other ones as well. Now, if here DVD-ROM, DVD, it has more capacity. See the capacity. So it is only here up to 900 MB. Here up to GBs, 9.4 GB. And Blu-ray, it's up to 120 GB. So the sizes changes. The technologies also changes. Now here it's only rewritable. That means you can write and erase and do. Here read only memory. That means used only to read the written data. Here it's write once. That means you can write only one time and after that you have to read. That's it. Rewritable means you can read and write any times you want. So here it is recordable, right? So only once you can record the information, then after that you have to read only. Here recordable and erasable. You can read, write at as much as you like. Then final thing is like a Blu-ray 3D, where you used to record video itself. Okay, this is third type, solid state devices. In this one, the main difference is we don't have moving parts. Heads and all these things are not here. So we have only solid parts. That's why we tell solid state devices. We have solid components, no any moving heads and parts. Okay. So here you can read and write data. So this is mostly commonly used. Uh, Pen drive, USB flash drive. So remember these names. You may have heard about pen drives, but not the USB flash drive. So this is very popular and very easy to take here and there, and you can have with different capacities. So you can read and write data fast. Then comes the memory cards. This is also very commonly used for the mobile devices and all these things. So it is very similar to the pen drive, but it's smaller in the physical size and basically mobile phones, digital cameras, computer devices, games, all these things are using the memory cards, SD cards. Understood? Yeah. So that's the end of the second part of the chapter 2. I will be doing some more videos for the chapter 2 for grade 10. So in this one, we learned basically about the computer systems and what are the basic devices we have, input devices, output devices, we have CPU and we have the storage devices, right? So hope you understood the chapter. If you haven't still subscribed my channel, please go and subscribe my channel and please add any comments, and if you like my videos, please do like and please share these videos among your friends, especially in this pandemic situation. Hope this will help you, right? Okay, so thank you very much.